in time we'll do far more positive videos, such as going after people like James Connolly and taking him home. He was a Celtic revivalist. He was as well to be Irish or Scottish traveller. He was a misrepresented, I think, misrepresented. He's been dragged through the mud, left, right and centre by all sects of Irish society, all quarters, all various different political persuasions. People believe he was a Marxist, he was a Leninist, he was a social worker, he was a labourist, so on and so forth. In actual fact, he wasn't. He may have participated in them activities. In the same way, many of us were involved with traveller or settled political persuasions. It doesn't mean we wholeheartedly disagree with them, but we also have our own mentality. And that's why we get into so much conflict. When I say we get into conflict, I think the conflict is reversed where settled people feel it's some form of conflict, that we will not come around to their ideas. When James Connolly, and indeed travellers, are trying to tell the settled people that no disrespect, but you're in a state of colonisation. You have been for 500 years, 800 years under British rule. It's a long time, it's hard to escape. I too speak this English language, but as I've mentioned, consciously aware that it isn't our language, consciously aware that we do not belong to this community that calls themselves the settled community. Settled was a construct put together by the English, in the same way Romanization or Romatized by the Roman Empire. English colonialism was quite brutal. We know that right across the world. It had set up its institutions, its imperialism. In Ireland was the first overseas country to be colonized by England. They set up the Trinity College, Maynooth College. I have to say Trinity College are the biggest bunch of spoofers. I've never been in the building, but even from an outside perspective, the whole way here from Sligo, you can see they're full of it. Not bad people or anything like that. So James Connolly had that perspective. He had the Celtic revival. And why was he dying? Why did he die? Of course, someone ordered him to be killed, as someone said, which is not funny now when I think about it. But nevertheless, we know how he died. The question is why he died. And he was trying to bring in old Celtic systems, ways of life, not to bring people backwards or to limit their prosperity or anything like that. Anyone that knows and the world knows. I mean, actually, the world is waiting for Ireland, was waiting, postponed, postponed over the coronavirus, but we're waiting for some kind of magic. In the last 100 years of so-called freedom that was just captured by the people in Dublin. But I'll tell you why they have no magic. And I'll tell you why, and I'll explain it in very short, brief detail. And you're probably thinking, who the fuck am I? And why am I talking like this? And how would I know this? Point me to where it says that. I'm telling you, you're looking at the person who's telling you. We are outside the colony. We do not share the identical same mentality. We participate in your mentality. And when I say your mentality, it is not even your mentality. I'm no linguistics expert, someone who specializes in languages. Now, I've made the statement before that the English language is not even a natural language. Not in the same way of Celtic languages, not in the same way of the vast majority of other languages. It doesn't mean it didn't start off at a very old version of the language we have now, the English language we call it. But it was manufactured primarily by the ruling classes, such as the Saxons and the Normans and the French and the Germans and the Spanish and all of these people that were at war with one another, competing with one another. Well, they found a way to make peace, and that was by constructing the English language. Sounds bizarre, doesn't it? So the settled people trying to get us to see the world through their eyes is a complete misrepresentation in the first place. Because with no disrespect when I say this, I'm coming from a place where I'm trying to save my family, my community, all of that. So it is a sincerity on my part, regardless how ignorant or how my fractured or broken I might be. I'm telling you straight unless you can prove me otherwise. And it's not the case that I'm trying to claim there's something that can't be seen and it's difficult to prove it, only because I say it. But James Connolly was not a Marxist. He wasn't a Leninist, as it's been represented. He, like other people, Celtic, whatever it might be, picked up these habits, picked up these almost a form of confirmation bias. In other words, when I hear parts of Karl Marx, I'm no expert on Karl Marx, or indeed any of these philosophers. I bounce off a lot of people that are. I pick up much as I can, try to learn what I can. But what he's talking about is a capitalist system. And he wrote it magically, to be quite honest. You know, he was predicting what would happen in the system. But that in itself didn't make him a genius, because it was a bit obvious for some of us. Not for the likes of Karl Marx, maybe not like for Engels, but they were exceptionally brilliant people. They almost found a way to be in the corridor between socialism and capitalism. But I'm going to bring a step back further, right? Because my perspective is, and it'll remain this way till proven otherwise, that either Karl Marx was looking at capitalism for whatever reason, his expertise. He had to bounce it off what socialism would have been, could have been. He himself may not have been a socialist of in the same makings as indigenous people, but that's where socialism comes from. So even James Connolly, and I'm sorry for looking between James Connolly and Marx, even James Connolly briefly spoke about Ireland had a primitive communism. There was nothing primitive about it. It was a very advanced, complex system. It only sounds primitive 300 years later, but 300 years later was dominated by somebody else's mentality. So it never flourished. It never was able to develop. And that's where James Connolly was coming. That's why he died. He tried to bring back what he called the IRA courts. They weren't IRA courts. They were Celtic Brehon law. That's what they were trying to do. So that's what James Connolly is. Karl Marx, who I spoke briefly again, and again, I'm not trying to be a Karl Marx or Leninist or James Connolly expert. People often say to me, and sometimes they say to me more times than often, where is this? Who said this? What did the experts say? Can you show us where this is written? Why? Because I come up with a story that's quite factual, remarkable maybe? No, it's common sense. You're a wonderful Yeats that I'd say his ankle is not even buried in Sligo, and all his goods are in Dublin Museum, because Sligo couldn't afford one. Well, they had and they could, but they misused the funds and created something else out of it. I must go into that sometime. Maybe I won't. Who knows? I don't give a shit in one way. Was also a Celtic revivalist. He's had some kind of bizarre ideas, but forgiven in some ways, some parts. Other activists like that, even the female, I think Markovic, forgive me for pronouncing her name, I don't have necessarily a great friends list where I bounce these things off. I've been socially isolated and socially excluded for the last 20 years by, unfortunately, just about everyone that I come into contact with or talk to, particularly travel organizations, more so. So I've been cut off from access to resources and platforms and people, what they call intellectuals in the settled community. So I come across like a raving lunatic, a guy behind a webcam with a nice picture behind him, a spacer. It's not my intentions, and it never is, to be in this state of mind, to be in this environment where, you know, I'm literally, truly up against the wall in many ways. It is not that I want something from you. It's what I need from you. And I need you to stop killing our community. James Connolly died for Irish travelers. That's just effectively what happened. Markovic, a wonderful woman. They are all people who bought into the traveler mentality. You might find that incredible to believe. But let me tell you about the traveler mentality. Let me tell you about the traveler culture. We're going to start from here, 2020. You called us travelers. And I say ye called us travelers. I mean, the English called you settled first. They settled you, civilized you, as they called it. Same with the Romans. So therefore, left the clan people who would not participate in the colonial system and went through fucking hell not to participate in it. We've seen it backwards. We've seen it gibberish nonsense. When they came to this island 500 years ago and tried to convince us to chop up all our open, free land that nobody owned it. Nobody had to own it. Everybody was entitled to it once they respected it. Chop it up and build tiny little walls and then rent it back to us. Didn't give us all these treaties. And same way you see modern day contracts. Same mentality, same sequence, continuation has never stopped. They tricked and lied to people, lost their lands, lost this, that, and the other. But anyhow, I won't go too much into that unless you want me to. I have no problem doing this. I can talk to this from quite depth, right up to the point where I know exactly how colonialism took its nasty effects in Ireland from every step of the way. And it's not that I'm a genius or I studied it or anything like that. It's just common sense. Once you click on it, once you see one thing, a lot of other things fall into place. That's just the way we think, I suppose, in some way. Some of us. I'm sure that's also for a lot of settled people. Now, I don't want to make this completely worlds apart between travellers and settled. Like I said, 2020, the name you give us, a political name that you give us, travellers. Before that, it was tinkers, itinerants. Of course, you do call us the gypsies, knackers, and all that kind of stuff too. But these are labels you wanted to place on us. So you put travellers on us, you put tinkers on us, you put itinerants on us, you put wanderers, you put hedge people, bog people, you've put woods people, various other titles on this group of people. We weren't always just a group of people. We were the Irish community. We were the Irish psyche and mentality, shrunk down, beaten down after war, invasion after invasion, policy after policy. 1,250 years we first engaged with conflict, with people coming to these lands. Nothing could have been worse since the 1500s onwards, through the Elizabethan Conquest, where they initially started off the imperialization. Again, I might chop and change a little bit over and back, but I know the settled people seem to think of history in different ways. They seem to think of it in blocks or something. Something that was behind them, gone forevermore. That is not the case. It's not the case for travellers. We're still living history. Our history hasn't changed apart from the constant conflict and betrayal by Irish settled people. You might find this difficult to believe. Now, let me throw the spanner in the works when I say settled people, because that's just another construct. I'm not trying to take away your Irishness, but there's no way you can proclaim to be Irish. There's no way you can go up on any international, local platform and proclaim how Irish you are and tell the world how Irish you are. You're not. You're actually some of the furthest people from what Irish is. And how we know that is how you've treated travellers, how you've talked about travellers, what you've said about us, primitive, backwards, inbred, all of these nasty, nasty things you've kept saying about us, without any hesitation, and never realised that that is exactly the same words the English colonizers said about your ancestors, the way they treated your ancestors. So we didn't participate, not because we were failed. Whatever strength we had, we didn't participate. I know travellers are living. I know travellers are still here with us. And I remember years ago, they would often talk about, if you talk to a fool long enough, you'll become a fool. It was a reference to settled people and their education, to convince themselves that this education was the way forward. In the same way, the English government set up local authorities, Gambin departments. They took the most, I don't know, what would you call them? Broken, fallen, deranged, vulnerable, whatever kind of people they took, and gave them power, because they had power. They had all conquest behind them. And remember this, Irish travellers didn't just fight the Normans and the Vikings, the Danish and all of that. We actually ran the Normans out of Sligo. We actually brought an end to the English conquest of Ireland. That's just literally facts. So when I say traveller, you might think in your mind right here now, your lifespan on earth, that you know it all about travellers, and you would have known. How would you not know? How stupid could you be to think that, you know, there's two different communities and we are the outsiders. We're the people who are different. We're not different. How would we be different from being Irish? It's impossible. Look at your history books. Look at all your warriors, all of these people. You're as well to be Irish travellers. So of course you give it these political labels. But who's ye? Let me break it down to you. For the best part of 1,000 years, the English had taken over Dublin, what they call a colony. So that was their patch. They built upon it. I'm not quite honest with you, most of the time it wasn't the case that we had issues with people coming to the island. We never had them issues. But of course, anyway, Dublin for 1,000 years had an English mentality because it was English ran. and there's no getting away from that fact. In the same way, we have a country, you might have an organization, you might speak whatever language, you might have community groups, you might have various other aspects of different languages and representation of them languages throughout Ireland. This was different. The colony in Dublin was constituted of people who were of English descent. So even when they come up to 1922, and I know I'm speeding up and I'm going through quite a vast part of history, but even when they speeded up to 1922 and the independence, the uprising, which I could tell you quite a bit on that too, and how you got it horribly wrong. A lot of you, no disrespect to you, but I'm no expert on it. I only have an opinion on my story, my mentality, my version of history. That's all I have. Everything else has been taken away from us. You even prevented us from going to school and having materials to read, impoverished us. So, yeah, since 1922, there was another group of people, well prior to that. They were kind of an Anglo-Irish Saxon type people. And again, there's nothing wrong with the origins of people. It's not necessarily to do with genetics. This is all about psychology and mindset and mentality. So in Dublin, since 1922, they hadn't changed any of the colonial systems. And you might think, well, why would we? We're kind of used to them now, and now we know how to operate them, and we own them. That's part of the illusion, I suppose, in one way. Because if you couldn't change the systems that had wiped at least 2 million people off this island, slaughtered your ancestors, demoralized them, raped your ancestors, killed children, let families starve to death with disease-riddled areas where no one else could go into. That they are the same systems. Because them systems, and every system, like any system, is designed to have a purpose. Why would you build a system if it didn't have a purpose? So when the colonial systems were built, it was to destroy Irish indigenous mentality. It was to rid of Celtic culture. In the same way, they have demolished whatever was left of the Irish Celtic castles in Ireland, but yet invested into Norman and English type setups. That's just the way it was. So 1922, no education system had changed from the colonial system. So Trinity College set up in the 1500s to brainwash settled people. Sorry. It would be settled people. Some of them would have been settled at that time too, I suppose. But anyway, it was set up to almost a psychological transplant. You were to give up everything thinking and being Irish and sacrifice that to become a British. It wasn't to become necessarily English, and I've said that a couple of times. But it wasn't to become English because you're still a lower class people as far as the English themselves were concerned. So they give you a secondary status, and that would be, you would be British. So you haven't changed that system. The politics that let so many people die during the famine, that kept shipping food out to one country while other people were dying to hunger and diseases. That politics wouldn't interfere. They believed in the market. That was the birthplace of capitalism in many ways. That was their ideology. The market must survive regardless of the consequence of loss of life. Pandemics, exact same thing, same mentality. You didn't change the education system, you didn't change the political system, and of course you didn't change the landlord system. What was James Connolly doing? Trying to bring back Celtic systems where we didn't necessarily have them kind of land rights. Nobody was entitled to that kind of land, and especially that land was taken from our ancestors. We were absolutely betrayed by the settled community since 1922. You didn't even get independence. You got an illusion of independence. We've seen how Dublin disregards the rest of Ireland. We see how all the power pumps from Dublin. Dublin is a colony that was created by the English. It's not even the capital of Ireland. It wasn't voted in by the Irish people. They didn't say, well, okay, we're going to pick Dublin. No, the English decided that for you. In the same way, your legal system. You can't necessarily get out of anything because the English system will decide, the English legal system. And that's based on guilty, not guilty. There's very, very little room in between. We've seen this, and it's been used brutally against Irish travellers, against Irish people. The same English colonial system that the settled people are telling us we should abide by It's the same legal system that destroyed their ancestors. So of course we take exception to those things. We might not even be consciously aware of it, that we're so open to understanding it, but we feel it and we sense it, and we've always done that. Remember, you took our people, when we were down at our lowest points in our history, when all our warriors were taken or shipped off to Australia and other parts of the world, when they were hung, when they were betrayed by the Irish settled people, hence why we changed our language, why we would no longer trust the Irish language. So we used the traveller language. It wasn't to evade you, or it was we didn't trust you. You couldn't trust yourselves. The Shonines, this is up to Gonbeans. We have them here in Sligo. Long history of them. You couldn't trust no settled people after that. No disrespect. You might take offence to this, but this is history. You come back and prove me wrong. James Connolly, Marx, all wonderful people. Marx, and I'm sure there are a lot of other people, particularly Protestants. You might find this kind of shocking, but some of our best friends were Protestants. Some of our best friends were the Normans. You can go back hundreds of years. They're the people that put the gun to the shoulder and fought with us. They're the people that died beside us. But there's no mention them really in history. Little Sigmunds or Sagmans or what do you want to call them. Of course, there is another Protestant that do get a lot of highlighting. I'm not, sorry, I won't say Daniel Connolly, but he was well to be a Protestant. You know, he was an upper middle class. He could have been Protestant too, if I know. So I can't distinguish between the two of them when I see them as settled people. And I respect both. One is protesting against religion and the other is obsessed with it. But people like that, Parnell, they were just a bunch of con people. They were like the Leo Vacklers and Micheál Martins of today. Artificial Irish. No disrespect to them. Not Irish. And I don't mean that against Leo Vackler in terms of his Indian heritage. I don't mean it that way. I mean on the island of Ireland, I respect his Indian heritage. And actually, I have quite a favoritism towards India because he went through the same spell as Ireland did. Mightn't have been as long. I think theirs was 200 years or something. English colonialism ravaged their country and part of it, as it did the world over, and had set up the same kind of institutions. When we hear about African Americans and they speak about their treatment, how they were treated, how they were kidnapped. I mean, all that happened in Ireland. When we hear about the Book of Discovery, land rights that happened in America, and the Native American lost all their lands, that happened also in Ireland. So we were the first overseas country to be colonized. So 800 years, you wouldn't be thinking quite straight afterwards. I know I've probably gone over, maybe I should find ways to chop this down sometimes. Yeah, so 1922, your legal system, your political system, your landlord system never changed. Why didn't it change? So now we hear about the 1916 uprising and how that is almost the starting point of Irish history, Day of Independence. A ton of shit what happened before that. We can go into it again. But the focus was to create this independence. What happened was, and according to, oh God, I forget his name, it's in Irish anyway, but he's written The Broken Harp. If you're a scholarly type person, I couldn't read half it because it's quite dense in its language. But like I said, I don't necessarily read a full book to understand what the person's saying. So anyway, so he was talking about this group of people in Ireland, not the people who became, not even the people who became Irish, more Irish than the Irish themselves. Other people who might call West Brits. And I'm not against those people. They're here long enough. They're entitled to be Irish. They're entitled to be British too if they want it. They want to have the Queen over. That's not a big problem for me. The problem is that the Irish traveller community were portrayed since 1960, portrayed long before that too, imagine. But were absolutely robbed, and worse than that. At least if James Connolly was alive, our lives would have been different. Because he would have brought back something that was ours anyway. And we would have thrived in that and survived. And be able to produce a better version of ourselves that you see today, unfortunately. So your systems never change. So if your systems never change and you keep replicating and repeating, you took your child, you put them into the classroom and you educated them, went to the next class, next school, so on and so forth. All in an English flow, all in a British mentality. How could you even claim to be Irish? You have segments of what you call Irish. You wave the Irish flag, sunburst. Sunburst is our flag too, you know. That goes back a long way. You need to stop this. Don't worry, we'll get up to scratch on it. Again, I'm not throwing things in the settled people's faces. They might get angry, they might find it somewhat resentful, but they must know deep down in them, if there's any Irish left in them, so even to have that Irish psyche, you know, their heritage, it's in your genetics. You know everything that I'm saying to you is absolutely factual, that there is not even room for contradiction. It might be a little more complex. We might go over that, we might talk about that. But the gist of it, that in Dublin, the colony, the people who I spoke about, the broken heart, the guy who wrote that, spoke about the people there once, that who were British, who were proud as hell of being British, in the exact same manner that you might have some Protestants in the north of Ireland who are proud of their heritage and where they came. Better or worse, it's not. It's just different, I suppose. Like everybody else's culture is different and beliefs. But in Dublin, you had their first cousins, I would call them, because these people, Fitzgerald, all these heroes you speak about and sing about and dance about, they already came from an English mentality. When their parents came here 2 or 3, 4 generations before that, they didn't go into the west of Ireland looking for to speak Irish language. They might have spoken as a secondary kind of lesson, but their mentality, their natural flow of mentality would have been English. So in 1922, why would they change systems? Not because they were familiar with them, because they knew them. They were identical to where they came from. So when I see Leo Vactor and Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil talking about, I'll stop there for a second. Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, both in first names belonging to our language. Fine. Do you hear the word Fine, as in traveller? Traveller Fine. It means man, means warrior in our language. Bure means the female version of the warrior. You don't have that in your settled community. You only have the male warriors, and they're not in. Yeah, you know, they're nice people. I wouldn't call them warriors. So yeah, and again, it's not to demonize, criticize Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, or any of these political parties. I'm trying to say to you, in some way, allow us the opportunity to work with you, and we'll teach you things, and we'll learn you. You might think, well, what the fuck would you learn from travellers who didn't go to an education system? Told you. We have different education. We didn't have to go through your education system to have an education. And by the looks of things, it looks like you'll be coming back to our world pretty soon. But I promise you, a lot of you are going to take a hard bang first because you won't know what to prepare for. You're already struggling. I see Eamon Ryan talking about lettuce, people mocking him. The laugh is on the people mocking the guy who was quite funny with the lettuce. But his mindset, his understanding of where we need to be going or getting out of is pretty much spot on. Sinn Féin, another good political party. Sinn Féin were the outsiders in Irish political party. Remember Leo Vactor said he would rather see the Wolves back in Ireland than see Sinn Féin in government. I'm going to tell you something in a very historical context, what that exactly means. I already told you about the Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil background, that they become anglicised. They are fully happy participants in a system that most of their ancestors had anyway, when they came here. When he made that statement, that was an historical statement that reflects Sinn Féin on one hand as the wild Irish, the savages, the backward Irish, all of this kind of stuff. The Wolves are an integral part of Irish culture, in the same way hounds are with travellers. We would have kept the wolves if we hadn't taken them for us. But wolves are very much part of Irish culture. And great, I wouldn't know how to call it, but a lot of people out historians would know this, so we agree with that. So he was saying that he would rather see the Wolves back than Sinn Féin in. What he was saying was the exact same thing when the English came here, that we were backward, that we should not even be allowed to vote. And after a lot of campaigning and lobbying, and we did get the opportunity to vote. Let's see, we were portrayed again by the settled community. But when they did get the opportunity to vote, they had to wait another 100 odd plus years campaigning, dying, so they could have their own representation. So they could say to someone in the community, look, you know our situation better than anyone else. You're not in Trinity College being brainwashed by an English mentality. You come from the bog, you come from the woods, and where you come from, at least you have that mentality, you have that understanding of our world. Unfortunately, it didn't work out pretty well.